So one of the most frequent questions I get about punching specifically is the lead hook, left hook for most people, but this left hook here, so, and a couple of different things, look like the hand position, the elbow position, and usually the pivot as well, okay? So I'm the school of thought that there's not necessarily a right or wrong, okay? So obviously different variations you'll use for different things, okay? So there's a school of thought where sometimes when you hook like this, the palm should be towards, or thumb up, or palm should be down and thumb towards, okay? So both, in my opinion, are absolutely fine. You're going to use them for different reasons, okay? I think traditionally in boxing, you're going to get taught to go palm down a little bit more because we want to encourage hitting with the knuckle part. Sometimes if you get a bit lazy and undisciplined and you're hitting palm towards, there's a tendency to slap and hit with this part. And in boxing, that's not usually allowed, okay? So they'll normally tell you to turn it over, palm down, and start hitting with the knuckle part. Another good reason to do that is I think it naturally brings up the elbow and it makes it a much more solid target. Sometimes when the elbow hangs, which again, we might use this sometimes, and I'll explain in a bit, it's not particularly strong. It can kind of buckle underneath, okay? So a nice tight hook like this with the thumb towards, palm down, and elbow up can be like a very strong punch. So rather than hanging the elbow, okay? So reason, and you know, if I'm shooting this longer range and people are longer armed, they might really want to turn this over to avoid that slapping. In MMA, it's absolutely fine. So if you want to go thumb up like this and slap it in long range, you can. That's absolutely fine. Okay. Just like I said, sometimes this elbow position you might not get the strongest hook. Okay. Now for MMA, like if we're constantly delivering the hook with this high elbow and we're against a good level changer, they're gonna time that and they're gonna take advantage of this space all the time. So I'm not against it all, people throwing hooks like this with the elbow down, and then we have some sort of frame where we can block the takedown and down block and start controlling, even start entering into clinches. So rather than hooking high elbow like this, I can actually just club it in, and I already have almost just like a collar tie to steer or get into that clinch. Okay. Again, like range is always going to play a part as well. If I'm playing long range like this, I might slap it in a little bit more, especially if we're at kicking range. You know, this short, tight hook is not necessarily good for kicking range. Okay, so we might have to play around with going long range, thumb down, being disciplined and keeping that elbow up, really hitting with the knuckle part, or playing that longer range and slapping it in. I can for MMA, obviously, I can use this part of the hand. Normally, we're still going to use the knuckle part, and I absolutely can still land with that, just with the elbow down. Again, in shorter range, I might be even clubbing it in, like this. Could be here, I could be slapping it in with the palm of the hand, like this, and then creating the frame. So the hand position doesn't necessarily matter. It all comes down to personal preference. Okay. The next thing is the pivot on the lead leg. Now, again, traditionally you're going to get taught a lot of the times to do this like really hard pivot here like this. Again, in MMA, if we come against a good kicker, they're going to take advantage of that. If I over pivot, well, not even over pivot. If I call it hard pivot. If I do this hard pivot, my leg is exposed, and I'm going to start eating these kicks. Also, it doesn't really put me in a good position to use takedowns off of the hook. Now I have to turn all my body back again to go in for my takedown. So I agree that you should use your hip, and that's the reason for this pivot. When you punch, it's always the body throwing the arm. Okay, so I agree that we must be able to use this hip. So I'm going to float my heel off the floor, and this still allows me to turn my hip through without giving away too much of this hard pivot and being open for kicks and lack of takedowns. Okay, so when we throw this hook, my hip can still turn. If you see here that my heel is off the floor, I'm not putting my weight over my leg and not allowing anything to turn through. So I consider this a hard pivot, which again is not necessarily wrong at all. Just when we're dealing with kicks and takedowns, it's not the best. Or a soft pivot, where I just float the heel and I do allow my hip to turn through, and I've not given up too much. So someone who wants to add takedowns off their punches, I'd advise not turning through too much. Again, Yeah, and sometimes we might use that. I might really swing through and load up for my outside leg kick. Okay, so there's always a rhyme and reason why I'm going to do it, but overusing it, doing this every time on your hook, I wouldn't necessarily advise for most MMA guys. And the other big thing with the lead hook especially is people want power. So what people struggle understanding sometimes is if this is your main shot, you need something else to put you in position. What we don't want to do is start telegraphing, trying to get power by loading up like this. Okay, it's telegraphed, it takes too long to travel, they're going to notice it, they're easily going to cover and move back. Okay, so we really want to use, especially if we're in this orthodox stance, using that right straight to pivot through and putting everything in position, and then we're going to try and throw the hook from there. So using the punch or the feints or whatever, I'm going to try and put my body in position rather than relying on this arm strength here. So when you practice it on the bag, I advise using one punch to set up the other. And then to exaggerate it, because when people drill this, of course they'll make mistakes, they finish the right hand short. So now the hip has not travelled through, or finish the punch here like this, and again they're relying on this. We actually want to get to here, and now throw the hook from here. So on the bag, rather than actually hitting the target like this, I advise sometimes actually punching past the target. So you know you're going to get full extension from that straight, hips are going to be all the way through, and you're naturally loaded up on that other side, rather than finishing the punch short and still not having anything on this side, and then relying on this pull back here to get power. So I can land, I've got my hip through, and then I'm going to fire the left hook from there. Again, one of the biggest rules when you're using your hands is you don't want to lose sight of your hands. So if I pull back like this and I can't see that hand, that's no good. I want to put my body in position and then throw it from here. So the trick is when you're practicing, throw the right straight, pass the bag. So you're fully hipped through, and then you can start landing that hook. So you're getting as much power from the hips, setting it up, and then through. So rather than finishing short, hip through.